open with prayer.
Lasst uns mit Gebet anfangen.
Dear Father in heaven,
Lieber Vater im Himmel,
I want to thank you for all your blessings that you've put on us today.
ich möchte dir danken für all deine Segnungen, die du über uns gegossen hast heute.
Thank you that we are here,
Und danke, dass wir hier sein können,
that we can study now your word.
dass wir jetzt dein Wort studieren können.
And I want to ask you that you will bless us as we try to find out the truth.
Und ich möchte bitten, dass du uns segnest, wenn wir hier die Wahrheit versuchen herauszufinden.
Please, Father, help Lawrence to lay out his thoughts.
Und bitte, lieber Vater, hilf Bruder Lorenz, seine Gedanken darzulegen.
And help us through Holy Spirit to understand the truth.
Und hilft uns, durch den Heiligen Geist die Wahrheit zu verstehen.
And I want to ask you also that you will bless all the people that are watching through live stream.
Und ich möchte auch bitten, dass du all diejenigen, die durch das Livestream zuschauen, segnest.
And please also the translation and the technique.
Und bitte auch die Übersetzung und das Technik.
And may that this study will help us in our preparation for the test.
Und möge dieses Studium uns helfen in unserer Vorbereitung auf des Testes.
In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesu Namen. Amen.
Right, so yeah, good evening once more.
So, ein weiteres Mal, guten Abend.
This evening we want to look at the topic whether we are to pay unjust fines.
Und heute Abend wollen wir dieses Thema befassen, ob wir nun ungerechten Geldstrafen bezahlen sollen.
And with unjust fines, I mean not fines that we think are unjust. Okay.
Wenn ich ungerechte Geldstrafen meine, ich meine nicht das, was wir als ungerecht bedenken, wie zum Beispiel, wenn wir zu schnell fahren,
But fines that are against God's law.
sondern eher Geldstrafen, die gegen Gottes Gesetz gehen.
So, and we will look at some quotes by Sister White, but also many pioneer quotes.
Also wir werden einige Zitaten von Ellen White anschauen, aber auch einige mehr von den Pionieren.
And basically, now with this vaccination mandate that is just upon us, you can see basically that also our pioneers, they went through similar experiences in their time.
Und wie wir sehen können, wie dieser Impfzwang oder dieses Impfgesetz ja sobald auf uns kommen wird, wir werden auch sehen, dass unsere Pioniere durch sehr ähnliche Erfahrungen hindurchgegangen sind.
I mean, they were not so much confronted with a vaccination mandate, but they were confronted with these state Sunday laws, which were kind of civil Sunday laws. Okay.
Und sie waren nicht so sehr mit einem Impfgesetz oder Zwang begegnet, sondern eher mit diesen zivilen Sonntagsgesetzen.
Yes, in these different states.
In diese verschiedenen Staaten.
Okay, so basically to introduce this topic, we first need to basically look at what Sister White writes here.
So, um dieses Thema einzuführen, wir müssen zuerst anschauen, was Ellen White hier schreibt.
Because we will soon read many pioneer quotes, and there they basically show us how they reacted when they were confronted with unjust fines.
Denn
Okay.
wir werden viele Pioniere-Zitaten lesen und wir werden sehen, wie sie reagiert haben, wenn sie mit diesen ungerechten Geldstrafen begegnet worden sind.
Okay, and just to already mention it, they always refused to pay. Okay.
Und nur um das vorauszusagen, sie haben es immer verweigert,
Okay.
zu zahlen.
So, but let's read now here first Sister White.
Aber zuerst lesen wir den ersten Zitat hier, ist von Ellen White.
It says, the heading has Sunday labor and the way to oppose error.
Also der Überschrift ist Arbeiten am Sonntag und der Weg, wie wir Irrtum widerstehen können.
And basically there was a council meeting here in 1895.
Und in 1895 es gab einen Ratschluss, eine Ratsversammlung, Gemeinderatsführung.
And there they basically discussed this issue about these state Sunday laws back then in this time.
Und da, in diesem Ratverschluss, haben sie dieses Thema über diesen Sonntagsgesetz in ihrer Zeit besprochen.
Okay, and just I want to make you aware of the date when it was, okay?
Ich möchte nur darauf weisen, auf den Datum, wann es war.
It says here, on the morning of November 20th, 1895. Okay, so it was in the year 1895 in November.
Jahr 1895 in dem Monat von November.
So just mark this down for now.
Wir markieren da, wir schreiben das jetzt hier nieder.
Okay. And then it goes on to say,
Dann sagt es weiter.
a council meeting was called at the large tent on the Armadale campground to consider some questions arising from the discussions of our brethren regarding the religious liberty work. The positions recently taken by some of our brethren indicated that there was a necessity for a more thorough understanding of the principles which must govern our work. Okay, so here we can see that some brethren took positions that were not necessarily the right positions.
So hier können wir sehen, dass einige von den Brüdern haben Positionen eingenommen, die nicht so unbedingt die richtige waren.
Okay, but we will see to what point it refers to here.
Aber wir werden sehen, auf was genau das,
Where they erred in their conduct.
auf was genau das spricht, wo sie in ihrem Verhalten verirrt haben.
Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
There were present brethren W.W. Prescott, A.G. Daniels, W.C. White, M.C. Israel, L.J. Rousseau, W.A. Colcott, M.C. Kellogg, W.D. Salisbury, James Smith, and sisters E.G. White and E.J. Burnham. Several letters were read with reference to the question at issue. Then Sister White read a letter which she had written to Elder A.T. Jones in May 1894, which had been unavoidably withheld until very recently. Okay, so at this council meeting now Sister White shares this letter that she actually wrote to A.T. Jones back then. Okay.
In diesem Ratversammlung, Ellen White liest diesen Brief vor, die sie damals zu A.T. Jones geschrieben hat.
A year earlier, yes.
Sie hat ihm ein Jahr zuvor geschrieben.
It says here, which had been unavoidably withheld until very recently, so it didn't get through him until apparently shortly before this date. Okay.
Aber es sagt in dem letzten Satz, dass es war unvermeidlich verhindert, an ihn zu kommen bis so kurz vor diesem Datum.
Okay. And in this letter, I only copied portions of it.
Und dieser Brief, ich habe nur Teile davon hier weitergegeben.
And also basically this question and answer that resulted out of this.
Und auch diese Frage und Antwort, der daraus resultierte.
It was about how they should work in the southern field.
Es war, wie sie vorangehen sollten oder arbeiten sollten in den Süden, also in den Südstaaten.
Because back then the southern field was obviously because of the slavery, there were many colored people.
Natürlich in den Südstaaten damals wegen der Sklaverei gab es viele schwarze oder farbige Menschen.
And also there were all these state Sunday laws now being issued at this time.
Und natürlich zur selben Zeit gab es in den verschiedenen Staaten diesen Sonntagsgesetze, diese zivile Sonntagsgesetze, die erlassen worden sind.
Okay, so and one question that was raised then at this council here was.
Und eine Frage, die in diesem Ratschluss hochkam, war, wie wir jetzt weiterlesen.
Should not those in the southern field work on Sunday? Okay, now let's see Sister White's answer.
So, lasst uns die Antwort von Ellen White auf diese Frage lesen.
This is not what she wrote in the letter.
No. This was a question that was raised in the council.
Also dies war eine Frage, die in den Ratschluss hochkam. Es war nicht in ihrem Brief.
Okay, and now the answer, but the answer is apparently in the letter. Okay.
Und jetzt der Antwort, und der Antwort ist in der Brief.
Okay. If they do this, there's danger that as soon as the opposing element can get the slightest opportunity, they will stir up one another to persecute those who do this, and to tick off those whom those whom they hate. At present, Sunday keeping is not the test. Okay, because back then it was just these civil Sunday laws. Okay.
Sonntagshaltung war kein Test, weil damals war es nur diesen zivilen
The
Sonntagsgesetz.
time will come when man will not only forbid Sunday work, but they will try to force men to labor on the Sabbath. So this would be then the time of test, okay?
So, wenn sie Menschen zwingen, auf den Sabbat zu arbeiten, das wäre denn der Test.
And men will be asked to renounce the Sabbath and to subscribe to Sunday observance or forfeit their freedom and their lives. But the time for this has not yet come, for the truth must be presented more fully before the people as a witness. What I have said about this should not be understood as referring to the action of old Sabbath keepers who understand the truth. They must move as the Lord shall direct them, but let them consider that they can do the best missionary work on Sunday. Slavery will again be revived in the southern states, for the spirit of slavery still lives. Therefore, it will not do for those who labor among the colored people to preach the truth as boldly and openly as they would be free to do in other places. Even Christ clothed his lessons in figures and parables to avoid the opposition of the Pharisees. When the colored people feel that they have the word of God in regard to the Sabbath question and the sanction of those who have brought them to the truth, some who are impulsive will take the opportunity to defy the Sunday laws, and by presumptuous defiance of their oppressors, they will bring to themselves much sorrow. Very faithfully, the colored people must be instructed to be like Christ, to patiently suffer wrongs, that they may help their fellow men to see the light of truth. Okay, so the risk was that impulsive people would then...
Black people.
Yeah, black people here. But
It would bring great prejudice on it. It would give all the spirit of slavery a reason to persecute them. That's why she said.
Yes. Okay. But she also, in another paragraph, she also speaks about white people also shouldn't do this. Okay.
So, hier spricht es natürlich über den Schwarzen in den Südfeld, aber in einem anderen Zitat, sie spricht auch über Weißen, also zugleich, wenn sie dies tun werden, zum Beispiel den Gesetzen widerstehen werden, wo es kein Testgesetz ist, dann wird das eben diesen Geist der Sklaverei und der Rassismus nur aufwühlen und sie einen Grund geben, unnötige Hass und Verachtung gegen Gottes Volk zu bringen.
Yes, I mean you could oppose it, but not like this open defiance. Okay.
Also du konntest zwar dagegen stimmen, aber nicht auf diese Art mit diesen offenen Rebellionen in dem Sinne.
Okay, next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
A terrible condition of things is certainly opening before us. According to the light which is given me in regard to the southern field, the work there must be done as wisely and carefully as possible. It must be done in the manner in which Christ would work. The people will soon find out what you believe about Sunday and the Sabbath, for they will ask questions. Then you can tell them, but not in such a manner as to attract attention to your work. You need not cut short your work by yourself laboring on Sunday. It would be better to take that day to instruct others in regard to the love of Jesus and true conversion. So, therefore, she basically gives counsel when you are in the area where is great prejudice.
So, sie gibt Rat hier, dass wenn du in eine gewisse Gegend bist, wo sie, wo ist Prejudice?
Vorurteile.
Stimmt. Wo sie große Vorurteile gegen dich haben.
Yeah, you need to be very discreet and not bring attention upon yourself unnecessarily. Okay.
Dann musst du sehr schlicht sein und nicht so unbedingt unnötige Aufmerksamkeit auf dich bringen.
Sehr diskret.
Diskret.
Okay, so the next question then came.
Und die nächste Frage, der aufkam.
Should the same principles govern our work and our attitude toward the Sunday question in foreign fields, where the prejudices of the people are so strong? So basically, if here in Europe there are also areas where strong prejudices, should also these principles govern us here?
So die stellt die Frage, so in einer anderen Gegend, wie zum Beispiel hier in Europa, wenn sie auch diese Vorurteile haben, sollten wir auch nach denselben Prinzipien vorgehen?
Says answer?
Der Antwort?
Yes, just the same. The light that I have is that God's servants should go quietly to work, preaching the grand, precious truth of the Bible, showing that the reason why Christ died is because the law of God is immutable, unchangeable, eternal. The Spirit of the Lord will awaken the conscience and the understanding of those with whom you work, bringing the commandments of God to their remembrance. I can hardly describe to you the way in which this has been presented to me. The Lord says in Revelation 22:16, I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. Have any one of you seen this angel? The messengers from heaven are close beside those who stand before the people, holding forth the word of life. In preaching the truth, it is not always best to present those strong points of truth that will arouse prejudice, especially where such strong feelings exist as are felt in the southern states. The Sabbath must be taught in a decided manner, but be cautious how you deal with the idle Sunday. A word to the wise is sufficient. Okay, so yeah, this is a principle that you should not unnecessarily denounce their errors. Okay.
Also das ist ein Prinzip, dass du nicht unnötigerweise ihre Irrtümer verdammen oder verneinen. Oder
You should rather preach the truth, and then people can themselves see, oh, this other's error. Okay.
so, du solltest eher die Wahrheit predigen, sodass die anderen für sich sehen können, ach so, das andere ist ein Irrtum.
Okay. There was one point I wanted to make. I forgot now, but by God's grace, come back. Okay, next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
Says, I have given you the light which has been presented to me. If followed, it will change the course of many, and will make them wise, cautious teachers, refraining from work on Sundays, not receiving the mark of the beast. And where this will advance the interests of the work, it should be done. We should not go out of our way to work on Sunday. Just simply refraining from work on Sunday is not the mark of the beast. That's what she says.
So, sie sagt hier, dass wenn du nicht gemäß des Gesetzes am Sonntag arbeitest, das ist nicht das Mahlzeiten des Tieres.
Okay. Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
After the Sabbath has been sacredly observed, in places where the opposition is so strong as to arouse persecution if work is done on Sunday, let our brethren make that day an occasion to do genuine missionary work. And then she just lists how you can do missionary work on this day. Okay.
Der Rest des Absatzes, sie zeigt, wie man Missionärarbeit an diesem Tag machen kann.
And obviously this then illustrates this time when all these civil Sunday laws come. We must also expect that there are areas where you have many prejudices. Okay.
Und da müssen wir auch erwarten, in der Zeit, wo wir in diesen zivilen Sonntagsgesetze hineinkommen werden, dass es auch Gegenden geben würde, wo sie große Vorurteile gegen uns haben.
Now I remember what I wanted to say.
Und jetzt erinnere ich mich den Punkt,
Because
den ich vorher machte.
have you ever asked yourself why Christ sometimes, or not sometimes, many times said, don't tell anybody when he healed people?
Hast du öfters die Frage gestellt, oder hast du je die Frage gestellt, wenn du liest in der Bibel, dass Christus öfters, wenn er jemanden geheilt hat, gesagt hat, sag es niemandem?
Yes, I mean, obviously this has some prophetic significance also, but
Natürlich hat das eine prophetische Anwendung, sicherlich.
But Sister White says it was because of this very point. He didn't want to create prejudices in the minds of people.
Aber Ellen White sagte, dass es zu seiner Zeit genau wegen diesem Punkt war. Er wollte nicht die Vorurteile in den Gedanken von gewissen Menschen in gewissen Gegenden aufwühlen.
Because, for instance, when he healed these demoniacs,
So zum Beispiel, als er die beide Dämonenbesessene geheilt hatte,
then the whole village came and sent him away. Okay.
die ganze Dorf ist rausgekommen und sie weggesandt, geschickt.
And there were other occasions when people then proclaimed it, and where Jesus said, "Keep quiet," and then they were so prejudiced against him that he couldn't do anything for them anymore.
Und der war andere Situationen, wo Jesus hat gesagt, sag es niemand, aber sie haben es dennoch gesagt und die haben die Vorurteile, die Menschen aufgewühlt, so auf der Art, dass sie nichts mehr wirken konnten.
Okay. So next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
The time has not yet come for us to work as though there were no prejudice. Christ said, "Be ye wise as serpents and harmless as doves. If you see that by doing certain things, which you have a perfect right to do, you hinder the work of the truth, refrain from doing those things. Do nothing that will close the minds of others against the truth. There is a world to save, and we gain nothing by cutting loose from those we are trying to help. All things may be lawful, but all things are not expedient. We have no right to do anything that will obstruct the light which is shining from heaven. Yet by a wrong course of action we may imperil the work and close the door which God has opened for the entrance of the truth. The final issue of the Sabbath question has not yet come, and by imprudent action we may bring on a crisis before the time. You may have all the truth, but you need not let it all flash at once upon minds, lest it become darkness to them. Even Christ said to his disciples, I have many things to say unto you, but ye cannot hear them now. We must not go into a place, open our satchel, show all we have, and tell everything we know at once. We must work cautiously, presenting the truth by degrees, as the hearers can bear it, and keeping close to the Lord. Okay, so we can see we need to apply wisdom in these things.
So wir können sehen, wir müssen Weisheit und Takt ist.
Takt.
Also Takt anwenden.
Yes. Okay, and these were now counsels from Sister White to those people in the southern field especially. Okay.
Und das war Rat, die Ellen White besonders für diejenigen, die arbeiten in den Südstaaten zur Zeit der Sklaverei gegeben hat.
Okay, and this was, as we read, in 1895, at the end of this year. Okay.
Wie wir bereits gelesen haben, das war 1895 am Ende des Jahres.
Because in these years leading up to 1895, from 1888 to 1895, as I mentioned, there were different states issuing Sunday laws, civil Sunday laws.
Denn in die Jahre davor, so ungefähr von 1888 bis zu 1895, es gab verschiedene Staaten in den USA, die diesen zivilen Sonntagsgesetze erlassen haben.
And Sister White clearly says, okay, if there's this area where you have high prejudice, like in the southern fields, refrain from working on Sunday. Okay.
Ellen White sagt, dass wenn du arbeitest in diese Gegenden, wie zum Beispiel die Südstaaten, wo sie große Vorurteile gegen dich haben, dann arbeite nicht am Sonntag.
Okay, but many Adventists, they didn't understand this, okay, and therefore they worked on Sunday.
Und viele Adventisten, die haben diesen Prinzipien nicht verstanden und haben aber dennoch am Sonntag gearbeitet.
Oder haben deswegen.
Doch am Sonntag gearbeitet.
Because they thought, all right, if we would not work on Sunday, we would kind of not make a difference between the holy day and the common day. Okay.
Sie haben gedacht, wenn wir nicht arbeiten werden am Sonntag, dann gibt es keinen Unterschied zwischen dem Sabbat und dem falschen heiligen Tag Sonntag.
And therefore many of them were then persecuted and trialed and convicted. Okay.
Deswegen viele von denen waren verfolgt und verhört und verurteilt.
Yeah, so therefore this was something where they not acted on right principles by laboring on Sunday unnecessarily. Okay.
So, hier war eine Sache, wo sie nicht nach korrekten Prinzipien gehandelt haben, indem dass sie am Sonntag gearbeitet haben.
But she was not rebuking them for not paying the fines. Okay.
Aber sie hat sie nicht getadelt, indem dass sie den Geldstrafen nicht bezahlen.
Okay, and now let's go to these cases where Adventists were now basically brought before the civil powers because they labored on Sunday.
So lass uns diese Fälle jetzt anschauen, wo Adventisten vor die Zivilmachten gebracht worden sind, weil sie eben am Sonntag gearbeitet haben.
Okay, and the first thing here is an account written by A.T. Jones.
Und das erste Zitat hier, das ist ein Bericht von A.T. Jones beschrieben.
And you can see it was from February 14th, 1895.
Und es steht unten, es war von 14. Februar 1895.
So it was before they had this council where this light now when this council was given.
So, es war noch bevor den Datum, wo Ellen White diesen Rat gegeben hat.
Okay, so let's read it.
So lass uns lesen.
It says 27th day Adventists are under indictment in a single county in Tennessee for Sunday work. The case is to be tried in March. Okay, Tennessee is part of the southern states.
Und Tennessee, das ist Teil der Südstaaten.
20 Adventists.
20 Adventisten.
In all such cases in Tennessee, where the accused have been convicted, they have refused to pay their fines and have gone to jail. So here we can see, they all refused to pay the fines and they rather went to jail.
So, hier können wir sehen, sie haben alle verweigert, ihre Geldstrafen zu bezahlen und sind stattdessen ins Gefängnis.
Okay, let's go to the next case.
So, nächster Fall.
This is now an account by E.G. Wagner.
Das hier ist ein Bericht von E.G. Wagner.
This is also from the year 1895.
Also auch von des Jahr 1895.
On the 5th of last month, 9 Seventh-day Adventists residing in Graceville, Tennessee, USA, were placed on trial for performing their ordinary labor on Sunday and were convicted. The fines and costs amounted in each case to over $20. These they, as a matter of conscience, refused to pay, and so they were all lodged in prison. Okay, so they also refused to pay these fines.
So, sie haben auch geweigert, diesen Geldstrafen zu zahlen.
They had to go to prison.
Die mussten deswegen ins Gefängnis.
Next illustration.
Der nächste Darstellung, nächste Zitat.
This is now also by E.G. Wagner.
Das ist auch von E.G. Wagner.
It says, the London branch of the Seventh-day Adventists is not the only section of that committee prosecuted for breaking the law. In Rhea County, Tennessee, the other day, several of the members of that branch were convicted for working on the Sabbath day. It was on Sunday, so their Sabbath day, and fined. On principle, they refused to pay, but unlike the London case, no distress was issued. The offenders have had to work out their fines on the county roads. So, in this case, what was the result or the sentence?
So, in diesem Fall, was war der Strafe?
Labor.
So,
Yes?
Arbeit.
So they had to work out their fines, and we'll see later. Sister White says, "All right, this is no problem." Okay.
Also so, die mussten ihre Geldstrafen aufarbeiten. Und wir werden später sehen, dass Ellen White sagt, das ist kein Problem.
Yeah. So you should refuse to pay, but when they now sentence you to work out the fines, this is something you should submit to.
So,
Okay.
du solltest zwar weigern zu zahlen, aber wenn die denn dich wollen, dass du die Geldstrafe aufarbeitest, dann das ist eine Sache, den du hingeben solltest.
Okay. Next account.
So, nächster Bericht.
Not in Russia, but America. Somewhere in the United States or Canada, the Sunday laws have had some of our friends before the courts or in prison very nearly all the time for months. So this was something where they continuously faced these charges because they kept the Sabbath and worked on Sunday.
Diese war eine Sache, die beständig begegnet worden sind über Monate, weil sie den Sabbat hielten und arbeiteten am Sonntag.
One of our American exchanges just received gifts.
Just received gives the
Thank you. One of our American exchanges just received gives the following newspaper press dispatch from Arkansas. Yes, Arkansas, which we may quote as a sample. Chester Gordon and his wife, two intelligent and respectable citizens of Eagle Township in this county, were convicted this week in the court presided over by Albert Disha, a justice of the peace, of Sabbath breaking and were fined $5 each. It was proved, and no attempt was made to deny the charge, that they are Adventists, and in accordance with the tenets of the faith, are accustomed to rest on Saturday, which they consider their Sabbath, and to labor on Sunday. They refused to pay the fines, although able to do so, and by order of the court were remanded to the county jail, where they now are. Husband and wife were handcuffed together when brought into town by a deputy constable. Okay, so here we see Arkansas, which is a southern state also.
So, hier können wir sehen, Arkansas ist auch eine der Südstaaten.
And they also refused to pay.
Und sie haben auch geweigert zu zahlen.
Next account.
Nächster Bericht.
This now speaks about the present truth, which was a a newspaper they issued.
Und hier spricht es über die gegenwärtige Wahrheit, was eine Zeitschrift zu der Zeit war, die sie drückten.
And so this is now going against the Adventist organization here,
So
or
hier
institution.
gehen sie gegen eine Adventist-Organisation oder Einrichtung vor.
It says the present truth is the organ of the International Tract Society Limited, which is one of the publishing branches of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, which holds that the true Sabbath is Saturday, the seventh day of the week, and not Sunday, the first. The present truth people therefore rest on Saturday and work on Sunday. Now the Factory Act forbids the employment of women and young persons on Sunday, and the only exemption which dispenses
It should be, which
Yeah.
is dispensed.
in the case of the Jews, who are passed over if they sign a special exemption form. The present truth conscientiously objected to signing this Jewish exemption form because it is Christian and not Jewish, and for 6 years the factory inspectors let it print in peace, recognizing the patent fact that it kept the law in spirit if not in letter. So they, even though they never filled this exemption form out, they were left alone to also labor on Sunday. Okay,
So,
6 years.
obwohl sie diese Exemption,
Ausnahmebescheinigung.
Ausnahmebescheinigung ausgefüllt haben, sie waren,
Nicht ausgefüllt.
dass sie es nicht ausgefüllt haben, waren sie in Ruhe gelassen zu arbeiten am Sonntag, 6 Jahre.
Then it says,
Dann sagt es,
the other day, however, some new broom came along and swept the present truth before a magistrate who fined it. It having refused to pay the fines, the bailiffs descended on it, confiscated all they could lay their hands on, including the engine, wherefore the present truth is likely soon to be the past truth. This is about the savagest instance we ever saw of the injustice of justice, and we hope that Sir Matthew Y. Ridley will make restitution as swiftly as may be. Okay, so here we can see also the Adventist institution, they refuse to pay the fine.
so
Okay.
hier können wir auch sehen, dass diese Adventist-Einrichtung, die haben geweigert, diese Geldstrafe zu zahlen.
And the result was all their goods got
Und das Resultat war es, dass
confiscated.
all ihre Güter und Maschinen und sowas war beschlagnahmt.
Okay, now let's go back to this church council that we read about at the beginning here.
So gehen wir zurück zu dieser Gemeinderat von Ellen White, die wir am Anfang gelesen haben.
Because now further questions are asked.
Denn weitere Fragen werden hier gestellt.
Question:
Fragen.
can we not get the truth before the minds of the members of parliament in a quiet way by furnishing them with reading matter? Answer:
Der Antwort.
from the light that has been given me, I see that we should fear lest rulers take their position against our work. If they do this, they will act like the enemy of all good. Every opportunity to become acquainted with these men should be embraced, but we should do nothing that will produce anything like prejudice. It means a great deal to be as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves. We have so much determination in us that often we do things unguardedly and rashly. We must appear before these men as trying to help others, working on the lines of the Christian help work. As they see the good work we do in these lines, their prejudice in a measure will be removed. Their hearts will be opened to the truth. Do not present the Sabbath abruptly. Present Christ. Should they begin to oppose you, saying, "Oh, he's a Seventh-day Adventist," lift up Christ higher and still higher. Okay, so when we get in touch with these leading men, for whatever reason, we always try also to be wise. Okay.
Wenn immer wir in Kontakt mit diesen führenden Männern kommen, aus welchem Grund auch immer, wir sollen immer versuchen, weise Vornamen
We
zu
should
geben.
not somehow act unguardedly or rashly in order, or the result would be that we would create prejudice in their minds.
So, wir sollten nicht unbedacht oder zügig handeln, auf der Art, dass wir Vorurteile gegen uns in deren Köpfen vorbringen.
Because otherwise, she says, we should fear because they can become real enemies against us.
Ja, weil sie sagt, wir sollten sie eher fürchten, weil sie können die fiesesten Feinde gegen uns werden.
Okay, next question.
Nächste Frage.
Would it not be as well for us to present principles rather than to dwell upon what the government will do? Answer.
Der Antwort.
We should have nothing to do with the actions of the government. Our duty is to obey God. When you are arrested, take no thought what you shall say or do. You are to follow Christ step by step. You need not commence weeks beforehand to examine the question and lay plans as to what you will do when the powers shall do this or that. Neither need you think what you are to say. Study the truth, and the Spirit of the Lord will bring to your remembrance what you shall say. Our minds should be a treasure house filled with the word of God. Okay, so here she says we should not already prepare some speeches, something like this. Okay.
Hier sagt sie, wir sollten nicht irgendwelchen Reden vorbereiten oder solche Sachen.
And also, we should not make already these precise action plans. Let's say, when they do this, I will respond this way.
Sollten wir auch nicht diesen Pläne schmieden, wie zum Beispiel, wenn sie dies tun, dann werde ich so handeln und wenn das geschieht, dann werde ich so agieren.
But we need to especially be established in the truth, and then the Lord can give us the right things in the right moment.
Sondern wir sollen eher in die Wahrheit etabliert werden und dann kann der Herr uns an das Richtige zur richtigen Zeit erinnern, was wir tun oder sagen sollen.
But it doesn't take away that you obviously should prepare in the sense that you should refresh your memory with all these arguments, okay?
Aber das heißt nicht, dass du deinen Verstand nicht vorbereiten solltest, in dem Sinne, dass du all diese Argumente verstehst und erinnerst.
No, we have to know all those things. We have to put those things in our heart.
Ja, wir sollen all diese Dinge wohl in unserem Herzen hineintun.
The Holy Spirit will bring whatever thought He wants you to bring out.
Yes.
Der Heilige Geist werde gerade die Gedanken in dir erwecken, die er haben möchte, dass du sagst.
Because, for instance, Luther,
Zum Beispiel Luther,
the night before he appeared the second time before the king,
so der Nacht, bevor er das zweite Mal vor dem König kam,
he went through all his understandings, refreshing his mind.
er ist durch all seine Verständnisse nochmal durchgegangen, um seinen Verstand zu erquicken.
Aufzufrischen.
Aufzufrischen, danke.
But he was not writing a speech, what he would say there.
Aber er hat nicht irgendeinen Vortrag niedergeschrieben, die er da sprechen wollte.
Okay. So next, but this is also a point we, by God's grace, can maybe look into more in depth in the future.
Dies ist gerade ein Punkt, den wir vielleicht in der Zukunft noch weiter anschauen werden.
Okay, next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
When the enemy begins to work, we need not allow our feelings to control and resort to strange fire. We need not become combative. So this is also something very important. Okay.
Das ist was sehr Wichtiges.
And we need to really submit then to all this unjust treatment. Okay.
Wir müssen uns all diese ungerechte Behandlungen hingeben.
Next sentence.
Nächster Satz.
By doing this, we may thus betray the cause at the very point where victory is ours. If we let go our hold of Jesus and trust in ourselves, it may take months or perhaps years to counteract that one wrong move. If you manifest some combative spirit or even would, use force.
Also wenn du ein kombatives Geist manifestierst oder dass du Gewalt anwenden würdest,
then it might take a long time to remedy this again. Okay?
sie sagt hier, es mag eine sehr lange Zeit brauchen, um dieses Unrecht an deinerseits wieder gut zu machen.
Okay, unless we are converted and become as little children, we shall never see the kingdom of God. These are the lessons we need to bring into our schools. The students do not need science as much as they need these principles. Teach them how to advance the truth as it is in Jesus. Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
The world is not to be condemned until after it has had the light. We must tell people the simple story of the cross. They are to be pitied, and just as much as possible, we must soften the message we bring to them. This will soften their hearts, so that the Spirit of the Lord can mold them. In all their past life, they have been receiving false ideas. If we come close to them and tell them of the love of Christ, we can do much for them. So that's a very important point. Okay?
Das ist ein sehr wichtiges Punkt.
We need to remember these people, these worldlings, they act based upon false principles because they were raised by false principles.
So, wir müssen gedenken, dass diese Menschen, diese Weltlinge, die handeln nach falschen Prinzipien, weil sie so erzogen worden sind.
And they have an evil heart and they don't know the grace of God.
Sie haben ein böses Herz und sie kennen die Gnade Gottes nicht.
Yeah, so we must pity them and not have feelings of revenge against them.
So,
Okay?
wir müssen Erbarmen mit sie haben und nicht Gedanken der Rache gegen sie.
And the Lord will not condemn them, she says here, until after they receive the light.
Es sagt hier, dass der Herr wird sie nicht verdammen, bis nachdem sie das Licht erhalten haben.
And also when you go to the Bibles, let's go to 1 Peter chapter 2.
Und auch wenn du zur Bibel gehst, so 1. Petrus Kapitel 2.
Let's begin in verse 21.
Fangen wir in Vers 21 an.
21 to 23.
21 bis 23.
For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps. So we need to follow his example.
Wir müssen Christi Beispiel folgen.
Who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. Who, when he was reviled, reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. Okay, so we are not to revile back, and we also are to basically submit and not utter any threats to them. Okay. Also wenn sie dich halt schmähen, sollst du nicht zurückschmähen.
Also wenn du sie schmähen, dann sollst du nicht zurückschmähen und wir sollten uns diese ungerechte Behandlung hingeben.
Yes, and not utter any threats.
Und keine Bedrohungen von uns geben.
Okay, because the Lord will not punish them until after they receive the light.
Weil der Herr wird sie nicht bestrafen, bis nachdem sie das Licht bekommen haben.
Okay. Next question.
Nächste Frage, wieder zur Notiz.
Is it wrong for our brethren to work out their fines? So this is now this portion we already read earlier, right?
Also hier ist dieser Teil, die wir bereits vorher gelesen haben.
That you can work out your fines.
Dass du deine Geldstrafen aufarbeiten kannst.
So, answer?
In der Antwort:
Christ, the King of Glory, carried the cross upon which he was about to be crucified. The people had not the slightest semblance of right to inflict this upon him, but he did not refuse to submit. Christ suffered and died for us. Shall we refuse to be partaker of his sufferings? Let the servants pay tribute as the master did, lest others be offended. So, here it speaks about paying tribute, okay?
Also hier spricht es darüber, dass die Tribut bezahlen.
But next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
When brought before courts, we are to give up our rights, unless by so doing we are brought into collusion with God. Collision.
It breaks God's law.
Yes, yes. Unless by so doing we are brought into collision with God. We are not pleading for our right, but for God's right to our service. So this is something we need to understand. Okay?
Diese ist eine Sache, die wir wohl verstehen müssen.
We are standing there not for our sakes in these courts,
Wir stehen in diesen Gerichtssaalen und so weiter nicht um unseretwillen.
and we are not to seek our own rights and benefits,
Wir
okay?
sollen unsere ersten Rechte und Vorteile nicht suchen.
But we should always uphold God's truth and law.
Aber wir sollten immer Gottes Gesetz und seine Wahrheit hochrecht halten.
It says, instead of resisting the penalties imposed unjustly upon us, it would be better to take heed to the Saviour's word. When they persecute you in this city, flee into another. For verily I say unto you, it should say, I think, ye shall not have gone over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man be come. Okay, so
Okay, the only question I would have in that is one sense is instead of resisting the penalties, what does that mean? I think that I would understand that.
So, wenn es sagt hier, anstelle diese Bestrafungen zu widerstehen, sagt, es wäre besser, dass wir zu einer anderen Stadt flüchten. Also ich weiß nicht, was das.
yes. No, I mean, as I understand it, is because she says you need to submit. Yeah, so if they put you into jail and all these things, make you work out the fines, you should not resist these things. Okay.
Also, so wie ich das verstehe, in White sagst, du sollst dich hingeben. Also wenn die diesen Geldstrafen geben oder
No, if they cast you into prison,
also wenn die
or
dich ins Gefängnis werfen
if they take away your goods,
oder wenn du deine Güter wegnehmen oder beschlagnahmen
or if they would make you work out the fine,
oder wenn die bewirken, dass du deine Geldstrafe aufarbeiten solltest.
then you should just humbly submit and not murmur nor complain against
Du
this.
sollst demütig hingeben und nicht murren und klagen.
And we'll see this as we go along.
Und wir
Okay.
werden das sehen, wenn wir so weiter hier lesen.
Because in the next quote,
Denn in der nächste
no,
Zitat,
this actually the next quote is still an Ellen White quote,
ach, das ist immer noch ein Ellen White Zitat,
but after that,
aber danach,
okay, it's actually I forgot a space between the Ellen White quote and the next quote, but doesn't matter. So let's just read the next quote, which is taken from Mount of Blessings.
so lasst uns diesen nächsten Zitat lesen, das ist von MB.
It says, Jesus bade his disciples, instead of resisting the demands of those in authority, to do even more than what was required of them. And so far as possible, they should discharge every obligation, even if it were beyond what the law of the land required. So, you should really show them that you respect them, okay?
So, du sollst wirklich dadurch zeigen, dass du Respekt vor sie hast.
The law as given through Moses enjoined a very tender regard for the poor. When a poor man gave his garment as a pledge or as a security for a debt, the creditor was not permitted to enter the dwelling to obtain it. He must wait in the street for the pledge to be brought to him. And whatever the circumstances, the pledge must be returned to its owner at nightfall. Deuteronomy 24. In the days of Christ, these merciful provisions were little regarded, but Jesus taught his disciples to submit to the decision of the court, even though this should demand more than the law of Moses authorized. Though it should demand a part of their raiment, they were to yield. More than this, they were to give to the creditor his due, if necessary surrendering even more than the court gave him authority to seize. If any man would go to law with thee, he said, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And if the couriers require you to go a mile with them, go 2 miles. Okay, so this is basically the spirit of non-resistance. Okay.
Das hier ist das Geist von nicht
Kein Widerstand.
Widerstand.
So, on the point, I get all this right, Sophie, first thought, but
Ich verstehe das alles.
the point is not paying the fine. It's not a resistance.
So, das Geldstrafe nicht bezahlen, das ist kein
Widerstand.
Widerstand.
It's a conscience matter.
Yes.
Das
Exactly.
ist eine Gewissenssache.
It says you're to do what they say unless it's a conscience matter. or
Unless
collision
it's
with God.
yes.
Du sollst tun, was sie sagen, es sei denn, dass es kollidiert mit das, was Gott sagt.
Exactly.
But you're to do it very meekly and just say, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Aber du sollst es dennoch sehr sanftmütig machen und sagen, es tut mir leid, das kann ich nicht machen.
Okay, and in the next illustration here, and
Die nächste Darstellung,
this is again taken from the pioneers.
das
Okay,
ist von den Pioniere jetzt.
so and I forgot to put a
Also nach MB, es gibt keinen Platz
or
zwischen die zwei
Yes.
Zitate.
and but this is now some Actually, it's not that quote I thought of, but we can read it. But afterwards, we can see when basically the guy comes to take away all your goods, how you should act. Okay.
Also nach diesem Zitat, in der Zitat danach werden wir sehen, wie wir uns benehmen sollen, wenn sie kommen, um dein Hab und Gut zu beschlagnahmen.
But first, let's read this here.
Aber wir lesen das hier zuerst.
It says, following this, 4 more of our brethren, this time in Henry County, okay, were indicted.
Indicted. Yes.
Yeah. They were
Indicted.
Ah, yes.
No, yes.
It's
No.
indicted, not indicted.
Okay, indicted.
Yes.
They were J.H. Dodge, J. Moon, S.M. Lowry, and Jess Stem, and W.D. Ward. The first 4 were convicted. They employed no lawyers, believing that it was of no use, and believing the scripture where the Lord promises to speak through his people when they are brought before magistrates. So what did they not make use of?
Von was haben sie keinen Gebrauch gemacht?
They didn't use a lawyer.
Yeah, they didn't use a lawyer.
Kein
They didn't get
Rechtsanwalt.
somebody to defend them.
Yes.
Kein Rechtsanwalt, um sie zu verteidigen.
And this is actually in these cases where you have conscience matter at hand, where something is about the law of God, you should not take a lawyer. Okay.
In diesen Fällen, wo du eine Gewissenssache hast, du sollst keinen Rechtsanwalt nehmen.
Well, it's also black and white. They've broken the law. It's why they would try and defend that.
Yes.
You know,
Exactly, they were not trying to. Yes,
say
but-
they didn't do it.
but the point is when you take a lawyer, he's then your representative, and he might.
He's going to use worldly,
Yes, he will
worldly
use-
principles
yes,
and
exactly.
not godly principles.
Wenn du einen Rechtsanwalt nimmst, der wird weltliche Prinzipien benutzen, um dich zu verteidigen und nicht Gottes Prinzip.
So therefore, in this case, the Lord will be your lawyer. Okay.
In Fällen wie diese, der Herr wird dein Rechtsanwalt sein.
Okay. In other cases, like civil matters, you can take a lawyer. Okay.
In anderen Fällen wie Zivilsachen, da kannst du wohl einen Rechtsanwalt nehmen.
So next sentence.
Nächster Satz. Satz.
They appeared for themselves and they were convicted. Refusing to pay their fines, they were placed in the prison there at Paris. And Paris is not France here, but Paris, Tennessee. Okay.
Das ist nicht Paris in Frankreich, sondern in USA, in Tennessee.
The people soon got tired of boarding them in the Paris jail, and so an affront was made. An afford was made to work them, and finally an old obsolete law was resurrected, by which they discovered that the Paris jail was a county workhouse. Then our brethren were placed in the chain gang and worked, but only for a few days, as their time had nearly expired. Okay, so they also made them then work. Okay,
Sie haben sie auch zur Arbeit gestellt.
it's like in a concentration camp already.
Ja,
Okay,
so wie in einem Konzentrationslager.
I think 3 of them were in jail over the Sabbath, and an effort was made to work them on the Sabbath, and a resolution to that effect passed the board. But the sheriff refused to act in the matter. He said, "Gentlemen, if you undertake to work these men on Saturday, I will have nothing whatever to do with the matter." And his earnest effort in their behalf saved them from the experience of an attempt to force them to work on the Sabbath. So you can see it was nothing about a civil matter, it was all about religious persecution.
So, wir können sehen, es war nichts
Yes.
mit einem Zivilfall zu tun, es war alles mit dem Gewissen zu tun.
They were then told that it would go harder with them if they persisted. And so, when they came to trial this time, not only the jail and the chain gang stared them in the face, but also the possibility that the severest punishment might be inflicted to compel them to work on the Sabbath. But they did not flinch. Okay, so, and this might be also something when we're in jail, they might also try to force us to do something on the Sabbath, which would not be right. Okay.
Es kann sein, dass wenn wir im Gefängnis sind, dass die mögen uns zu irgendetwas zwingen wollen, dass wir an der Sabbat tun, was nicht richtig ist.
So, but we are not to flinch. We need to remain steadfast.
Aber wir sollten nicht dahin geben, wir
In
sollten
this
standhaft
way,
bleiben.
this might be the, because the type, but it might bring us to actually face this test, even though it's a type. You might
Yes.
still face the
Auf so eine Art und Weise. Es kann sein, dass obwohl unser Test hier nur ein Typus ist, dass wir dennoch in den Sabbatgewissen getestet werden.
Okay, next quote.
Nächstes Zitat.
This speaks now actually about how also other people of other denominations remain steadfast to their convictions. Okay?
Und hier spricht es über, wie andere Menschen von anderen Glaubensgemeinschaften auch ihre Überzeugungen treu geblieben
It
sind.
says, this is precisely the measure of freedom of religious belief that was guaranteed or allowed under the Puritan theocracy of New England. The Congregational Church had control of legislation. It embodied Congregationalists' doctrines in the law and required everyone to conform to them. So there was this denomination of the Congregationalists, and they basically issued now their doctrines as state law. Okay?
Es gab diese Glaubensgemeinschaft, diese Congregationalists, und sie haben ihre Lehren als Gesetz oder Staatsgesetz angewandt.
And everyone was required to go to church. The Baptists and Quakers did not believe in the divine sanction of those ceremonies. They therefore refused to comply. Their refusal, of course, was counted discourteous. Thanks. This discourtesy was made criminal because it was indeed a violation of the law. They were first fined, but they refused either to pay the fines or to comply with the required ceremonies. They were then whipped, still they refused. They were then banished, and yet they refused, and the Quakers even refused to be banished. Then they were hanged, and yet those who still lived would not comply with the required ceremonies, and they had no constitutional guarantee to protect them in their refusal. Okay, so here we can see they also refused. Okay,
Hier können wir sehen, die haben auch geweigert.
so until the very end.
Murdoch, some of them for no good, that's terrible.
So, bis aufs Ende. Und einige von denen haben sie sogar umgebracht.
Yes. So this is like crazy, right?
Das ist
kind of crazy.
Wahnsinn.
This is what will come
Aber
up again.
das ist, was wir begegnen werden.
Okay, now the next quote is the quote about this this Adventist whose goods got confiscated.
Diese Zitat jetzt, die wir lesen werden, ist diesen Zitat über diesen Adventist, deren Hab beschlagnahmt
And
wurde.
maybe this can be the last quote for tonight, and then tomorrow we can pick it up and read the rest.
Dies wird der letzte Zitat für heute Abend sein und morgen können wir den Rest lesen.
It says, soon after I returned from Turkey, the authorities, hearing of it, came and asked for the 320 francs, the sum of the fine. So he also got fined for Sunday labor.
Ist auch Geldstrafen erhalten für Sonntagsarbeit.
I explained to them that I could not pay it and gave the reasons why. Then it was turned over to the public collectors, who sent an order to pay it, giving a list of the fines. So this is now the public collector, is the guy who comes to get your goods. Okay.
So, dies hier der öffentliche Sammler, das ist derjenige, der kommt und beschlagnahmt deine Güter.
Also Gerichtsvollzieher in Deutsch.
Gerichtsvollzieher.
This order was returned with a refusal to pay. I soon received an order to appear before the civil court, where I again gave the reasons why I refused to pay. The court decided the collection should be proceeded with. Shortly after this, a notice came from the collectors that on a certain day they would come to attach my goods. So this is also what would happen to us. Okay.
Das ist auch, was uns geschehen wird.
Yeah, they will send you an information. They come this and this day. You should be at home, and allow them permission to enter your house.
Die werden dich einen Brief geben und sagen, an solch einem Tag sollst du zu Hause bleiben und Erlaubnis in deine Wohnung erlassen.
At this time, it appeared that they could take my personal property only, and could not take anything from the association. This was a source of joy, because before this, it was said by some, it is quite easy to stand firm when you have nothing to lose. But now this situation was relieved. On a stated day, the officer came to attach the goods. At first he said, "You had better pay this. It will save lots of trouble and expense." This was a new man, and we took the occasion to give him the reasons why we could not pay it. He labored hard with me for about an hour before he would proceed to attach the goods. He then wanted to know what he should take. I told him I could not tell him. This was a case of persecution, and he would have to do the whole thing himself. He looked the rooms over and asked my wife what he should take. Her answer was about the same as mine. After he had listed enough to cover fines, we went to the office and had another conversation when he returned. Okay, so he offered no resistance. He was courteous and explained to him all the reasons.
Hat keinen Widerstand geleistet, war gut maniert, der hat ihm sachlich die Gründe erklärt, warum er so handelt.
And he gave him free range because basically it says here it was a matter or a case of persecution, and therefore he had to do it all himself because it was unjust what he was doing.
Die Freiheit gegeben, er hat ihm nicht geholfen, weil er hat gesagt, dies ist eine Sache der Verfolgung und ich kann damit nichts zu tun haben, ich muss alles alleine machen.
Because it was an unjust cause.
Weil es eine ungerechte Sache war.
Okay. And next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
We afterwards received notice of the sale of the goods, and in case they were not redeemed within 20 days. At the expiration of the time, the goods were taken to the public auction rooms. We did not know when they would be sold, but had a small tract on the situation prepared to print and circulate as soon as we learned when the sale would take place. Thursday evening, the authorities notified us that the goods would be sold the next Monday. That gave us only Friday in which to print our tract. But we could print only half enough, so we were obliged to run the press on Sunday. It seems as though the Lord brought us in such a place that we would either have to abandon our plan or run on Sunday. The presses had not been running on Sunday because the pressman did not desire to do so. However, this brought it where there was a certain pressure on the matter. So they now wanted to print a tract explaining everybody now what happened. Okay.
So, sie wollten einen Rundbrief drucken, eine Erklärung für allen zu geben, was mit ihnen geschehen ist.
Well, these tracts were circulated in the city, about 15,000 of them. We put one in every house, so that when the sale took place, the people all knew what was going on. The auctioneer said to me when he took the goods, "Of course you will be down to buy these goods in." I told him, "No, I do not care to buy any more goods to be seized." Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
Many of these tracts were returned with marginal notes on them, and it would be rather interesting to you to read the criticisms. I have a whole stack of them returned, and among all, not one favorable one. Okay, so people were commenting and sending the tracts back to him. Okay.
So, Leute haben auf diesen Rundbriefe niedergeschrieben, ihre Kommentare und zurückgeschickt.
Those that felt somewhat favorable did not have the courage to express it. They kept still at least. Some of these notes ran something like this. It served you just right. If I had been judge, I would have made it much heavier. You should have had, in addition to this, 20 stripes. If you do not like it in our country, you had better go somewhere else. Again, you have gone crazy. You are a colossal buffalo. Present yourself to the zoological gardens. But we found that thinking people felt differently about the matter. So therefore we also need to understand here we cannot expect many people to sympathize with us. Okay?
Das wird auch unsere Erfahrung sein. Wir können nicht erwarten, dass viele Menschen Sympathie mit uns haben werden.
Yeah. But some thinking men and women, they will then start thinking about these things.
Aber
Okay?
einige gedenkende Männer und Frauen werden darüber nachdenken.
Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
For running our presses on Sunday to print this tract, we were duly fined again. Duly fined again, and this time 200 francs and 3 weeks imprisonment. And in the case the fine was not paid, 40 days for that. So they again had to go to jail.
Die mussten wieder ins Gefängnis.
Here the question came up, what shall we do in the future? And after duly
Yes.
considering it, we thought it would be best to close the press room all the days in the week and have the press work done elsewhere. It is not our duty to remain in the same place and submit ourselves to repeated persecution, but it is our privilege to flee when persecuted. The press room is the department that caused the offense in the past, and while it would be putting us to some inconvenience to close it, it would be consistent with our principles. So basically he was referring to they would have been fined over and over and over and over again every week or
Meint,
whatever.
dass wenn sie so weiterarbeiten werden, sie werden bestraft und dann wieder bestraft und dann wieder bestraft und es werde kein Ende sehen.
So therefore they heeded the instruction of the Savior.
So, deswegen haben sie den Beschluss, den Rat von Jesus befolgt.
If they persecute you in this one city,
Wenn die dich in diesen eine
flee
Stadt
to another.
verfolgen,
Okay.
dann flüchte zu einem anderen.
Okay. So that's something we also need to study out what exactly or when exactly this applies. Okay.
Das ist eine Sache, die wir auch studieren müssen, genau wann das anzuwenden ist.
But I think in our case here, we already see that there's a European-wide vaccination mandate now in discussion. Okay.
In unserem Fall hier, wir können sehen, dass europaweit, also es wird ein europaweites Impfgesetz diskutiert zurzeit.
And also, back then it was not the test, okay, but for us it's the test. Okay.
Und damals, das war nicht für sie ihr Test, aber für uns hier, das ist unser Test.
This one breaks God's law, that one didn't. That's the difference. They weren't being forced to break God's law.
Yes,
We
yes,
are being
yes.
forced to.
Also damals waren sie nicht gezwungen, Gottes Gesetz zu brechen, wir wohl.
So, therefore, it's, at least according to my understanding at the moment, it doesn't make sense to, to flee now to other countries at the moment.
No,
Okay.
Zumindest mein Verstand nach, es macht keinen Sinn, jetzt nach anderen Ländern zu flüchten.
God's institutions, when they're set up, you can't just shut them down and run to another country and set them up. Every country is going to be persecuted.
Yes.
So it can't mean that what you just think it means. It has to be a principle that we have to understand.
I mean, here they applied this principle, right? They were now here continuously persecuted in this area, so they fled now to some other area. Okay.
Hier in diesem Fall haben sie diesen Prinzip angewandt, die waren fortwährend verfolgt in diese Gegend, also sie sind woanders gegangen.
What I'm saying, right? When you set up a school, it's a huge setup and outlay and all the rest of it. You can't just simply, let's pack up and we'll just go to, it's not that simple.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is the persecution is going to be the same everywhere.
Yes, and that's my point.
In unserem Fall, die Verfolgung wird überall sein.
It's
So,
a principle that we need to understand.
Dies hier ist ein Prinzip, die wir verstehen müssen.
So that's my point, because for us, we can expect that now Europe-wide this law will come soon. Okay.
Für uns können wir erwarten, dass in ganz Europa dieses Gesetz erlassen wird.
And most likely it will come worldwide. Okay.
I mean,
Höchstwahrscheinlich weltweit.
when they persecute us in this village, for sure that will be our point. We have to move somewhere
Also
else.
wenn sie uns hier in diesem Dorf verfolgen, dann sicherlich, das kann der Punkt sein, wo wir woanders hin müssen.
Yes, but we need to study this saying out, or this
Aber wir
principle.
müssen diesen Prinzip studieren.
But as we can see, okay,
Aber so wie wir sehen können,
as soon as it comes to your conscience, okay,
sobald es eine Gewissenssache wird,
you should not pay the fine.
du
Okay,
sollst diesen Geldstrafe nicht
and we'll see
bezahlen.
this also more fully tomorrow when we continue reading. Okay,
Und wir werden das auch morgen auf völligerweise sehen, wenn wir weiterlesen.
but when you refuse to pay the fine,
Aber wenn du diese Geldstrafe weigerst,
then you need to humbly submit to all the negative consequences and sufferings that will come upon you. Okay.
musst du auf demütige Weise hingeben, all diese negative Konsequenzen, die denn als Folge auf dich kommen wird.
Unjust as they may be. Okay.
So ungerecht, so wie sie sein mögen.
Dürfen wir dann Widerspruch einlegen?
So.
Yeah, maybe.
Weil es verzögert eine Sache.
Yeah, I mean, you can present your cause, until it's finally decided. Yeah.
Also du kannst deinen Fall darbringen, bis es letztendlich entschieden wird.
But we also, in conscience matters, we should not use an worldly or even, I guess, an Adventist lawyer. Okay, you should
So,
trust the Lord. Okay.
Sachen des Gewissens sollten wir keine weltliche oder sogar adventistische Rechtsanwalt benutzen. Wir sollen die Sache dem Herrn anbefehlen.
Because, I mean, there is not even an Adventist lawyer you could use today, right?
Es gibt noch nicht mal einen adventistischen Rechtsanwalt, den man heute gebrauchen kann.
Because in this present truth movement, we have no lawyer. Okay.
In diese gegenwärtige Wahrheitsbewegung, wir haben keinen Rechtsanwalt.
But we have a lawyer, which is Jesus Christ. Okay.
Aber wir haben einen Fürsprecher, der Christus ist.
Alright, so therefore we can see how we should behave when this test comes.
Sehen, wie wir uns verhalten sollten, wenn diesen Test auf uns kommt.
And when they come in our houses to take our goods,
Und wenn sie kommen in unsere Häusern, um unsere Güter zu beschlagnahmen,
don't resist them.
so widerstehe sie nicht.
Don't act impulsively and
So,
not being combative. Okay.
so, werdet nicht kombativ oder nach Impuls handeln.
But just submit and trust the Lord who judges righteously. Okay.
Gib's einfach hin und vertraue dem Herrn, der gerecht richtet.
Okay. And tomorrow evening we will continue with this topic.
Morgen Abend werden wir mit diesem Thema fortsetzen.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Yes, and always remember, look up, okay?
Gedenke immer nach oben zu schauen.
Because the Lord is in control.
Denn der Herr, der ist in Kontrolle.
Okay, then let's close with our prayer round.
Das ist wirklich ein Gebet von dir.